Hold up, before we get into this video, I'm going to suggest that you take a little quick peek at the description box below to see the volunteer form for the Igbo API and Igbo dictionary projects. If you are interested, you just want to find out some more information, please go to the links, maybe even fill out the form, and we'll see how you can get involved into the project. The delete operator makes it possible for developers to delete or remove properties from objects. In fact, it's the only way you can remove information from an object. If you take a look at this code block example, you can see here that I have my person object with 4 key value pairs, where I have name, age, occupation, and extra. And at some later point in my application code, I realized I want to remove my extra key. So what I do is I use the delete operator where I do delete person.extra. And when I print out my person object, I can see now I only have 3 key value pairs. Delete has always been the quick and easy solution for removing properties from objects. And if you don't believe me, we can take a look at some extra examples. So what I'm doing in this code block is that I'm using the object.keys function to create an array of keys that lived inside of the person object. Now that I have an array of keys, I'm going to reduce over that array, where I have a callback function that takes in 3 arguments, which are final object, key, and index. Inside of this function, I'm basically checking to see if my current key is equal to extra. If it isn't equal to extra, then I want to get its corresponding value and place it inside of my new final object at the current key. And then I return final object. So essentially what I'm doing with this function is that I'm filtering out the extra key, so the final object only has my 3 key value pairs of name, age, and occupation. But having to look at and explain this function already gave me the shivers. It's way too over-engineered, it's way too complex, and it's just not fun to have to look at. To be more specific about why this solution is not good in comparison to using the delete operator is that it's introducing the complex reduce function, it's constantly generating new arrays of person objects values, and it's just a ton of extra lines of code. So I definitely made this example over-engineered and more complex than it needed to be, but I wanted to illustrate the point of sometimes it might just be better to use built-in JavaScript features rather than building out your own. But maybe a more practical and fair example would be assigning the undefined value to the key that you want to be treated as deleted. So what I'm doing right here is that I'm assigning undefined to person.extra. When I print out the person object, instead of seeing 3 key value pairs, I still see 4, but extra now has the undefined value. Even though the solution emulates on the surface an undefined key by assigning undefined to that key, I would be a little cautious of this approach just because you still have the same amount of keys living on that object. So technically you're using up the same amount of memory as you were before the delete, so you're not actually saving any memory. And if at any later point in application code where it expects to see less keys living on the object, then the solution is no good. There are other possible solutions that you could come up with for deleting properties from objects, but the obvious winner in these 2 cases and a lot of other situations is just using the delete operator. Later in this video, I'm going to show you one of my personal favorite alternatives to using the delete operator. But let's take a closer look at some of the limitations for delete, since you can't just be going around your application code deleting variables left and right. To start off simple, we're going to take a look at variables that are created with the var, let, and const keywords. So any variable created with var, let, or const cannot be deleted using the delete operator. So in this code block example, what I have here is I have 3 variables, title, duration, and release date, all using var, let, and const. When I call delete on each of these variables and try to print out these variables again, I notice that their values still exist. This is because delete is only able to remove properties that are nested inside of objects. The interesting thing about the delete operator is that it doesn't throw errors in non-strict mode. So if you want to know if delete was successful at actually deleting a value, you can tell by whether it returns a true or false value. If you want to go into more detail about how all of this works, I'm going to leave a link to the MDM documentation in the description below, and the documentation does a great job at explaining what non-configurable variables are and how they work. But what about arrays? How do they fit into all of this? The great thing about arrays is that since you are technically able to index at any location or position inside of the array, you can actually delete any of those properties that live inside of that array. So here I have my array animals that have all my animals, and then I use the delete operator at the 0 index of my array for animals to delete the first element. But something interesting happens when I'm using the delete operator with an array. Instead of actually deleting or removing the element and changing the length of my array, all I'm doing is inserting the undefined value at the index that I specified. So it's really important to note that the delete operator does technically work with arrays. It's going to return the true value, but it actually doesn't really remove the element from the array. All it's doing is just injecting undefined at the index that you specified. If you actually want to remove a value from an array, I would recommend using the array.slice function, since it can just cut out a specified portion of your array and then return the final updated version of the array that you're expecting. So earlier in this video, I mentioned that I wanted to walk through one of my personal favorite alternatives to delete, and that alternative is the omit function from Lodash. Lodash is a utility package that has hundreds of different utility functions that make your code more declarative and expressive. And one of my personal favorite functions from that package is omit, which takes in 2 arguments. The first argument is the object that you want to work on, and then the second argument is an array of strings which represent the keys that you want to omit from that object. So in this code block, I'm importing the omit function from Lodash, and then I am calling the function where I pass in my person object as the first argument, and then I provide an array of strings as my second argument, where I say extra is one of the keys that I want to omit. The omit function is going to return the updated person object, which when I print it out, I can see I now only have 3 key value pairs. When I first started learning JavaScript and started using objects, I thought it was like practically impossible to remove properties. I just kept generating new objects where I would just filter out the keys that I didn't want from the last object. But the process of deleting properties from objects doesn't have to be tedious or tricky at all. The delete operator just makes it extremely easy to remove data from objects. But the delete operator, along with like the Lodash omit function, makes it super easy to remove properties from objects. That's it on the delete operator. Let me know if you have any questions. You can drop your questions in the comment section below, or you can reach out to me on Twitter where we can have a conversation about this, previous videos, JavaScript, anything in between. Also, a quick shout out to the Igbo API and the dictionary app that I'm building out. I'm looking for translators, editors, grant writers, UX, UI designers, software engineers, anyone who can do literally anything. If you are interested in contributing to the Igbo API and the Igbo dictionary, I'm going to leave the volunteer forms down in the description box below. The more, the better. And with all of that, please subscribe to the channel for more videos, and I will see y'all in the next video.